Well, hello, folks. This is Jamil Swift for Gunstruck Reviews. We're here in Phoenix, Arizona at Enlo Custom Guns with Marty. How you doing, buddy?
Good.
Marty, a couple of weeks ago, I found this old AR-15 bolt that I've had since the 90s, okay?
Okay.
I brought it to you, and you took it completely apart to see the pros and the cons on it, and if we could rebuild it and use it, and you said, what happened?
Well, I mean, we noticed the gas key was loose, and that was one of the first things that was kind of a red flag, right? You know, if you look at a well-made AR-15 bolt carrier, this is one of the critical components of the gun, right? So as a critical component of the gun, we want to make sure everything's secure in it, and the gas key is loose, and in this case, not staked, right?
Yeah.
So as far as staking goes, when the screws are torqued down, right? They're torqued to spec, and then we would just go ahead and stake it so that the screws can't back out under stress. Well, we went to torque the screws down and figured out that even our screws were no good, and these were old enough to where whoever created this bolt carrier in the 90s, I mean, this is kind of a nice bolt carrier. I mean, it's chrome plated, right? It has the cutouts for the old Colt style. So you know, this was designed not to go into a full auto, but you know, it has lower mass. But you know, this was a thing. We went to go even just to torque down the screws, and they started to strip under a minimal amount of pressure, right? So they couldn't even torque down to spec. And so as that goes, we turn around and we got some new parts, a new gas key, and some grade 8 hardware screws from Luth, Luth AR.
And also, you discovered that the extractor insert and spring were subpar. And so we also got some parts from Luth. We got the insert and the extractor spring from Luth. And one thing that we noticed when we took this apart, this thing was Loctited in instead of staked.
Yeah, that's something you do run into occasionally, because there are spec ways to build ARs, and unfortunately, there's a lot of companies out there that are just taking anything it can get. I mean, AR-15s are by far the most popular rifle in America. And so many companies have come along and started creating them, excuse me, started creating them that they'll cut corners where they need to. And it sucks, but I mean, you'll run into, this is another one I have here. These were usually machined from a solid piece, right? Solid component. When I start running into cast parts, and this is another one that the screws yielded before we even hit torque spec on this, and this one just keeps your gun from cycling. It kills your gun, keeps it from cycling, and you know, like I say, this is one of those critical components. But we've been running into that where, you know, you'll see things that are not built to spec. You'll see things that go into like cheap kits. Okay, there's a big problem with 80% AR-15s out there because, okay, everybody got a kit for $300, $400, right? Well, okay, how good was it? I had somebody come by and say, hey, I had a problem with my gun, and this is one of the first components I ran into, and it wasn't anything about it that made me jump out and go, oh, hey, there's a problem with that. I racked the gun. I said, you know, something's not right. Something wasn't right. This is a buffer. This is a carbine buffer, and it has no buff to it. It's just a dead weight. There should be weights floating around back and forth in this. A guy bought it at a gun show, and you know, it would have cycled okay, but he would have had occasional out of battery. He would have actually been shooting it and had the bolt bounce, right? And so the bolt bounce, he would have had a time where he'd have a misfire and not understand what was going on. This was his problem. This was his issue, and this is a $4 part being, you know, shoved into a $350 kit, and who knows. But so yeah, this is what we found here, right? Like the old extractor inserts were blue, right? In the 90s, we got rid of the blue insert. We went to a black insert. The spring was not mil spec, right? And I could just squeeze it and feel it and go, okay, that's different, right? When we're going by mil spec, right? I'm squeezing at it and it's like, okay, I can just tell right there alone that, okay, that spring is sub quality, right? So yeah, when we assemble this next one, we will do things by the mil spec, and my specs are. We're taught to me. It's not to say that this is just free information out there. I actually was put through multiple actually Colt classes in order to. They give out the specs, but they also give a proper build method. And a lot of people will sit there and tell you, okay, when you buy a Colt, you're just buying a name. That is absolutely not true. At least it wasn't when Colt was producing real AR-15 some years ago. I know there's some controversy about it now. But the thing is that they had a very high standard of quality control. They had a very high standard of the materials going into their guns and a very high standard of the material going out of their guns, right? And that's really where I get my specs, according to what is the TDP, the technical data package. And those were Pentagon approved. And, that meant that if they had to change something, they had a mountain of paperwork that they had to go and back and forth with agencies to say, okay, here's our change that we're going to make AR-15s. So they will be, at least good enough to go into the hands of our soldiers. And Colt was very big on saying that their guns going from any gun being made in their factory was going through the same standards of testing. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm very particular on this type of stuff. So, but yeah, we'll go through the we'll go through and install the new gas key and stake it to torque the screws down to spec and stake it down properly.
Okay. Yeah, and then we're gonna reassemble the bolt and reassemble the whole thing. You inspected the washers here.
The gas rings.
The gas rings, and you said that they were good.
Yeah, they're okay. Yeah.
Okay, they're okay. So we're gonna go ahead. It's a little dirty, but
yeah, that's normal.
That's normal. So let's go ahead and assemble it. It's all on you now, buddy.
Okay. So in here, you can kind of see our bolt carrier, at least the top of here. We want to make sure that this thing sits flush, right? We want to make sure that it isn't going to get in here sideways, because sometimes these are too big for these cuts. I've actually run into this where these won't fit, and so they have to be ground to fit. Another thing is that you can pay attention to this here. We can actually see at the top of these screws here where they started to yield. The torque spec is 55 inch-pounds, and they yielded long before that. They just kept twisting off, and there was nothing that was going to save them. So proper material is one of those things out there that you hope every manufacturer is using. Like say the bolt carriers themselves are made from 8620 steel, and the actual mil spec is Carpenter 158. Now there is I can't recall off the top of my head what the other tool steel spec is, but there is another one out there. But at least as far as mil spec goes, it's a proprietary steel called Carpenter 158. Isn't necessarily that important. There's other guys that use something else, and like I say, I can't think of it off the top of my head here. But what we're going to do is, or at least as far as the steel that it shouldn't be, is something like 4140. That's a good steel. It's just not good for what we're talking about here. So we're using an aircraft. We're using an aircraft gasket sealant here, right, or aviation gasket sealant, and we're gonna put this on the base of the our gas key here, right? And I'm just gonna smear this stuff all over. And the reason why is, at least this is spec. Now this is, I do want to at least make sure this is clean on the bottom, in case we've cleaned this with alcohol before. We've also prepped the other side, right? And I can go both sides, but it doesn't matter that much. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on here. You see how I got a ton squirting out there? And I'm going to clean this off because this stuff gets kind of sticky. And the main reason I'm just getting the excess off of this a little bit isn't so much that it's a problem. In fact, it will kind of leak out a little bit when you shoot it the first time, right? But it's going to go down inside there, and I need to clean that as well. So from here, we're going to tighten our screws down to 55 inch-pounds. And torque, first one.
What a difference! Those things are torquing to spec.
Yeah.
The other ones, yours, you know,
we didn't get anywhere close.
No, yeah, they were yielding big time. Okay. And now you're going to clean the rest of the gunk out of.
Yep. So once again, I'm just going to clean off this stuff here. It's not the end of the world if there's a little bit of extra, but like I say, it's going to kind of leak out a little bit when shooting, and that's normal. But you don't want to let this set up for about 24 hours.
Okay. Yeah. We're not going to shoot it for a while.
This one has a big open backside because this is a carrier that was designed during the assault weapons ban. So that's why it has this big cutout here for hammer, and also we're going to go and clean on the backside of this, where the excess gasket is going to be.
Yeah, I would notice that when we play with guns, we have an inordinate amount of Q-tips everywhere. Buy the low-quality, cheap ones too.
You know, well, you can buy low-quality, cheap ones. I actually like the higher quality ones.
Really?
Yeah, I do. And the reason why is because sometimes when you're doing a lot of cleaning, like stuff like this, you end up with just being frustrated, and you don't have this cotton back. But okay, so now that we have that cleaned off, I actually just blew on it there a little bit. I stuck my mouth on that, and I blew out just to make sure there's no excess junk in there. And I'm going to clean it out one more time, just to make sure I got nothing else in there other than all the carbon on it. Then I'm going to grab my staking tool.
And you're going to stake the screws in instead of using Loctite.
Yeah. So I mean, the gasket's there to kind of seal top and bottom, right? But the screws, after having been torqued, they actually have you can kind of see these little serrations. There's little serrations on the sides of these screws, and even the old ones have them, which of course weren't staked, right? But those will aid, because what's going to happen is that this is going to come in. These two screws are going to come in on the side here, and they're going to compress. They're actually going to compress my the sides of the gas block in place, or the gas key in place. What I'm going to do is just come in until that screw bottoms on one side, then on the other. Now, obviously, the mil-spec builder, they have something a little better than this, right? But actually, the guy who created this one makes some very handy ones. But you can see the stakes on both sides, right? They're really coming down hard on the sides there, so that the screws can't back out. And this is used. I basically just flip this one around a few times. So same thing. Just want to keep it aligned.
It's an interesting process, Marty. Mm-hmm. I knew that they were staked. I didn't know the reason why the staking and how it was done.
Yeah.
Either. So.
Well, you'll run into a cycling issue. You'll run into where it'll seem like the gun doesn't want to lock open, or doesn't want to eject completely, or something to that effect. But I mean, you definitely need the correct parts involved in your ARs, and kind of how we were talking about, this thing, right? This one has no weight in it whatsoever. It's a weight. It's probably better for a pistol, but it was sold as a 5.56 kit, right? You'll also run into varying chamber dimensions on AR-15s, where you'll get 223 barrels that are marked 5.56. Mm-hmm. In which case, you're running, if you run 5.56 through your 223, you now run an overpressure cartridge in your chamber. And that's going to put excess wear on your bolt. It's going to wear all this out, and there's, like I say, we've run into a few things like that before, where you'll run into things that are not spec, or at least not what they say they are. And so that's why you do want some good quality components, right? So like one of these things here, we were talking about the inserts, right? These are the old style inserts. They're pretty easy to spot because they're blue, right? Now you have the new black ones. Well, the blue is just a softer rubber than your black ones, right? Well, with a softer insert, which was designed to keep the spring from compressing too much, then you have an underpowered spring, which I can compress here and go, all right, that's obviously not good. If we're going mil-spec springs, right, you can see I'm squeezing at that thing pretty good, right? And yes, a mil-spec spring with this, and I mean, a mil-spec spring with this black insert is going to be different, right? But we're going to go a little overkill on this one, right? We're going to grab a Wolf spring, which, I mean, Wolf makes actually pretty awesome springs, right? But the thing is that this one's extra power because AR-15s are kind of known to have some issues around the extractor, right? And then we're gonna go even more overkill. We're gonna throw a synthetic O-ring in there, right? And this O-ring, right? You can't just grab any old hardware store O-ring. You actually have to get like ones that are made to go in with the extractor insert, right? But as far as this goes, right? You can actually see here on the back side where they both have kind of a taper towards the back, right? That back is going to snap in with our insert in the top there. So that's our insert, right? And then we're just going to kind of roll this thing in, and this one's going to be kind of tough. In which case, there, oh, that snapped right in, good. So that's going to snap right in. This one's got a lot of extra force on it. And we're going to throw this O-ring on here. You say, this O-ring is not spec, but it's overkill. Right, and at least check my extractor hook, make sure it's still sharp. Now, to compress this in place, this needs a fair amount of compression. Yeah.
They should make a tool for that.
They really should, but that's why we're throwing this one in here. And I ate my Wheaties this morning. There we go.
It's a good thing I bought you breakfast this morning.
There, that's good. Hammer. There we go. So now that's in, right? Check our rings. Then, actually, we'll go one step further here. We'll lube this. So one other thing here is just how much do we lube this, right? Now this thing isn't exactly clean. We haven't exactly cleaned it, right? But I mean, if we're gonna lube this, right, and this is not exceptionally dirty, but it's got a little bit of carbon to it. But if I'm gonna oil this thing, right, I'm basically gonna put a little bit of oil right up in here on the rings. And I don't have a ton of oil left over on this anyway. That doesn't matter, because what I don't need to have happen is I don't need to just saturate this thing. I mean, I'm really just kind of going a little bit. Any oil that's back here is going to burn off, right? So I'm putting a little on the rings. I'm putting it a little bit forward of the. Of the rings, because everything's going to blast when the gas comes back in here into this expansion chamber, right? It's just going to blast everything out the sides and out these two ports, right? So I'm putting just a little bit of lube on here. And that's about it. I mean, when I'm assembling in the gun, I might just put a little bit of excess around the bolt lugs. But what I don't need to do is dump gallons of oil into this thing. And then last thing, we're going to install this sideways, rotate it, pull it back, or run it forward. Then we're going to cover our hand, right? I'm going to drop the firing pin in place, right? So now I'm just going to make sure that my firing pin protrudes. I'm going to check the tip comes out first before I install my cotter pin here, right? And the last thing I'm going to do, very important thing, make sure it doesn't fall out.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason why is because if you put this in before the firing pin was bottomed out in here, right? And this one's a little easier to spot, but if you put this in on the other side when you're shooting, and this thing cycles. Let's say you rack the gun and now this firing pin's stuck somewhere up in here, and now you're having a very fun time at the range trying to figure out how to get it out.
Yeah.
So that is staking your gas tube, or gas key, excuse me, and installing your extractor spring.
Well, thank you, sir. I learned a lot today by seeing you work on these, and actually I learned the importance of the staking and why having good parts makes a huge difference. And good maintenance too, idea for to maintain your extractor spring in good health with the right parts is paramount on this.
Yes, yeah.
So the rest of the thing, as you told me before, this is a fairly good bolt carrier that can be used in any project that you might have.
Yeah, no, it's you know, the carrier itself rarely is worn out, and you might one day, if you run through multiple guns, eventually replace the bolt, but as far as the carriers go, usually they last pretty well.
Oh, the most important thing is keep that key well staked.
Yeah, that thing's not coming loose now.
That's great. Thank you very much, Marty. Thanks, buddy. And again, guys, thanks for watching. And remember, stay healthy, be safe, and have fun at the range.
Thank you for watching Gun Stock Reviews. Please visit our website at www.gunstockreviews.com for more exclusive content. Please visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/gunstockreviews. Your contributions would be greatly appreciated and help us grow our selections and frequency of videos.